If you're new in sales and all you're tracking are the number of sales, you are tracking the wrong number. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Slow Pitch. And hey, we're back together. Lane and I together, back together. We're actually able to record something this time. Welcome back, Lane.
Thanks, Rob. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I know you've been busy. I've been busy. And we just couldn't coordinate schedules for a little while. So every once in a while, as I've said before, I'll run out a little mini episode. And while they're not as interactive with two people talking through some stuff, and it does help to give a little something for folks who want to listen to a little tip maybe for the day. So that said, I am Rob.
And I'm Lane.
What are we talking about, Lane, today? What are we talking about?
Well, Rob, a while back, you mentioned there are some critical elements for success for a new salesperson. We're at the beginning of a new year here, so I thought that might be a good time to talk about that.
So then let's talk about the top 10 sales tips for beginner salespeople.
You're listening to the Slow Pitch Podcast, a podcast about selling less and closing more.
All right, Rob, so let's start off with defining what is a new salesperson.
Yeah, that's probably the best place to start. I'm a new salesperson when I'm in the first year of ever selling anything, meaning I've never sold anything before. This is my first foray into sales. That's one version of a new salesperson. Another version of a new salesperson could be, I'm new to a company. I have some experience, but I'm not fully aware of all the pieces that go on in this company. And I may not have the same sales techniques or same sales approach that this company has because I'm from another company who has a different type of sales approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask if someone coming into or wanting to learn a new approach, we could, kind of classify that as a new salesperson.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way to do it too. Because if you are in a sales role or you've been in a sales role and you listen to us and you're like, hey, some of this is a little bit different, but I kind of I want to try some of this, and which you should, because it really does work. What I would recommend is thinking of yourself as a new salesperson and just being open and thinking about, hey, what should I be doing versus I already know that. So anytime somebody approaches sales with the idea of, I've been in sales for 20 years, I already know everything I need to know, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I hate to say that. So I think you need to think long and hard about what you think you know and say, all right, you know all that. Great. Let's think about what are some other avenues or other ways that you might be able to get sales or increase your sales. I'm not opposed to thinking if you've been around for a long time doing sales forever, that you're just fine. You probably are just fine. If you've getting everything you need out of life, you've gotten all your goals accomplished. In fact, you're probably getting more than you need to, then you should just turn this podcast off. You don't need to listen to us anymore. You've got it. But
I think they need to listen.
Yeah. But if they've approached all this with 20 years of experience and said, gosh, I would really like to get a little bit more. Okay, that's where I'm at. So that's what I think of as a new salesperson.
So now that we have that defined, what is the first tip, Rob?
So, all right, the first tip, and I think this is really a really difficult one for some people, is to stop thinking about you or your sale. And you need to start to think about them and their need. I see a lot of salespeople, or I've heard a lot of salespeople, I've experienced a lot of salespeople who are literally just trying to get their sale, right? They need to get paid. They need to sell something. I had somebody the other day, I was looking at a vehicle. And when I was there, of course, used car salespeople are the best salespeople, right? I mean, they got all the experience in the world. They know what they're doing. They don't need any training. So hopefully they're not even listening, right? Because they don't need it. Because that's always perfect when you go in there in the sale. It's easy, right? I mean, you feel comfortable. I mean, you never feel like you're getting screwed or anything, right? So
there's never any pressure.
No, never any pressure. That's exactly what it was. It was so much pressure. They're like, listen, we sell this, we do that, and my financing and blah, blah, blah. They told me every reason why I should buy and didn't ask me one question as to, hey, why are you buying this vehicle? You would think they would ask that question. That would be one of the main reasons you'd want to know why somebody's buying. And if they don't ask, why are you buying this vehicle? Then they don't understand what the needed pieces that need to go into this vehicle are so that you have everything you need and you're getting what you need out of it. So you're happy with the vehicle, right? I needed some specific things for this vehicle. They didn't even ask me, oh, are you going to put anything inside this vehicle that's going to be heavy that needs to be towed around? No, they didn't ask me. Is that what I needed it for? Yes. Do you think they got the sale? Probably not.
You might think they don't care.
You might think they don't care. That's the rule number one. Stop thinking about you and your sale and your quotas. Stop. If you're new in sales and all you're tracking are the number of sales, you are tracking the wrong number. You're never going to get where you want to go by tracking total number of sales. I know that sounds opposite of what you think, but that's rule number one.
So Rob, I feel like I'm, with some prospects, I feel like I'm really trying to cover what their pain points are and solve their problems. But then I just don't hear back from them. They don't email back. They don't call back. I can't get that second meeting.
Yeah. So I think one of the questions I would ask is this an initial call or a call back after, or you've had your meeting and now you're kind of trying to get back in connection with them?
It would be after the first meeting, and trying to reestablish contact.
Gotcha. So in that first meeting, what's probably happening then is you're not getting into the pain part of getting them to explain information that's affecting them. And so pains would be, I'm not getting enough sales, or I'm not getting enough leads, or I'm not getting XYZ items, whatever they list out. And there's a dollar amount associated with that. And if you start tracking down the line and saying, all right, they said they haven't gotten enough leads. If they would have only been able to get 25 leads instead of the 2 that they got, how would that impact their business? Walk them down the math. If you do that, and it turns out that because of their sales dollar average sale and the extra sales, they would have made an extra $10,000 in the month. Okay, well, maybe 10,000 is okay, but maybe it's not that much. So you need to understand, is that good for the business or not? Is that what's the normal sale per month? So you start to get a feel and some value to it. Once you start doing that, they start to understand that you get me, you understand my business. And so I don't know how you left it or how you leave it at the end of that meeting. If the next step isn't planned, that could be another component. So I know we've talked about it in a couple different episodes before. Yep. So anybody listening who's had that issue come up, go back to those episodes where they're like, hey, they don't call me back, or I'm not sure what's going on with that. That's where I would get into something like that.
All right, great. How about tip number 2?
All right. So tip number 2 is stop applying pressure to yourself. And really what I want you to do is I want to think to yourself when you're in a sales call, when you're in a sales meeting, or any of those situations where you're working with the customer or client who's a potential customer or client, what I want you to do is think of it as, boy, I'd love to have the sale, but I don't really need it. I know that sounds really weird, but there's something psychological that if you need this sale in order to make the next payment that you need to make in your business or need to make payroll, they smell it. They can smell that on you like white on rice. It is not something you want to walk into a meeting with, right? You want to be able to walk into that meeting thinking, if I get the sale, great. If I don't, I don't. In fact, here's what I will tell you. When I shifted from just working through the process of sales and trying to work them through it, and shifted from that to a position of, I'm not for everybody. It doesn't always work out. And in the end, I would really prefer for you to tell me this is not a good fit. If it's not a good fit, I would rather you tell me that. And can you commit that to me? And if they do that, they feel a lot more at ease that if they don't make it, they don't make it as a sale. That's totally fine with me. That's totally fine with them. That's the position you want to be in. It feels strange, but literally in my mind, I walk out of those meetings and walk into those meetings with the mindset of, man, I'd love to have the sale. But if I don't have the sale, I got too many other things going on. It's totally okay. And if you approach it that way, they feel that way. They feel that confidence, and they will. Honestly, what my biggest frustration I get into sometimes is if I say something to somebody like, I don't think this is a good fit, they want to buy. It's a really weird dynamic. I don't know what that is, but every time I've tried to push away a potential client that is like, I don't know, this is not very big of a project, or it's too big of a project. When I push it away, it comes right back, and it comes back harder. And it's a very weird dynamic. And it goes to the pressure that you're applying on yourself to try to close the deal. They can feel that car dealership that I sat down with, I felt it so bad. Like, I mean, it was like, I almost asked the guy, when was the last time you sold a car? Because I feel like you haven't sold a car in like a month. Like, that's what I feel like I wanted to say to him. And I didn't, because that's what it felt like. And they can feel it. That's why that's rule number 2.
It sounds easier said than done to just not think about your quota and your boss breathing down your neck. So that's got to be it's a big challenge.
It is. It is not an easy thing to just say out loud. And yeah, it's true. Over time, you have to work at that. And if you have to write it down before you start your sale, before you start your meeting, before you start your call. Write it down, put it right in front of yourself. I'd love to have it, but I don't need it. And it's amazing. You just have to picture your bank account. I have $1 million in my bank account. That's what you have to think of. Like, I have $1 million. And if your business is a $10 million business, I have $10 million in my business. Whatever it is, whatever your number is that you think, I'm good, I don't need anything, that's where you need to come from. You need to come from that place. Write it down, ingrain it in your brain as if it's real. And guess what? When you start doing that, it becomes real. It's the weirdest thing.
It sounds like one of those daily affirmations. You put the little sticky note on your mirror in the bathroom in the morning, and you're always saying that I don't need the sale. I don't need the sale.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me. Yes.
So how about tip number 3, Rob?
So tip number 3, this may seem obvious. If you're new in sales, you may not think this is really obvious and you may not understand what this means. But the basic way to put it is research your potential client. You may say, oh yeah, no kidding, I'm supposed to look them up. I'll learn a little, I'll look at them. Okay, so that's all. Yes, do all of that. But what you need to understand is not only what their business is, who's involved in the business, and what information is on their website, so that you can use that information and show that you understand who they are. And by that, I mean, by showing that you know who they are, you're not asking questions that they're answering already on their website. So if on their website, like for example, I had to interview somebody not too long ago, and they asked me, well, what is it you guys, what kind of clients do you guys work with? Boy, if you had just looked at my website for like 5 seconds, you would see what kind of clients that we work with. That should have not been a question. And immediately my brain was like, boy, you didn't do any research. And then as the interview went on, it was even more obvious that they didn't do any research. And so those types of questions you should be prepared with ahead of time so that you can get into more of the detail. That's information that's not on their website. That's one piece. The second piece is know their industry. What are the problems that are inherent in that industry? You can find that information out. If you go to, I think it's Hoover's, they have a section in there about business research, hoovers.com. And I think you can do it through the library and so forth. But there's a way you can look up information about a company and the industry that they're in. And here's the top 3 problems that HR has, the top 3 problems that the CEO has, the top 3 problems that a finance area has in that industry. Boy, wouldn't that be a nice question to ask if it's related to your industry? You should have those questions ready to go so that you can deal with that, ask those questions. Maybe it's not affecting them. Maybe it means you're finding out pretty quickly in your conversation that there's no need for them to even do business with you. There may be no need. So you'll find that out pretty quickly. And I would rather know that, by the way, earlier than I would later, right? So, but know where their leaks are. I call them leaks, but where are they losing money? Without knowing it, without realizing it? Where are they not getting sales? Where are they running into problems internally, externally? Sometimes it even helps if you sat down and did a SWOT analysis real quick on that business itself, on that company. Take 20 minutes before your call. You know the industry a little bit if you've already done some research. What is the SWOT analysis for that company? What visually can you see from the outside? And then in your interview, in your questions, in your call, in your meetings, you should start to be able to fill out their SWOT, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And strengths and weaknesses are internal. Opportunities and threats are external. And so when you start to do the research and you start asking the questions, the strengths and weaknesses are the ones you're going to ask them about, particularly in their business. Opportunities and threats, you can start asking questions related to that. And the more you understand all that stuff before you go in there, the better your chance of getting a sale, or at least getting to the next meeting. Know the prospect, know the potential client better almost than they know themselves without the personalities. They have personalities that are going to be different and above and beyond what the business does, but that's really one of those steps that most people glaze over and they shouldn't.
All right, Rob. So I'm peeking ahead on your list here, and I see number 4 is find your helper.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to find a helper in the company you're trying to?
So that kind of goes hand in hand with the research. So here's one way to do it. So what I had for find your helper is find somebody on the inside who can help you navigate the company. It could be an individual that you're already connected with on LinkedIn, believe it or not. It could be somebody that you know who knows somebody in that company. So if you have a second connection, somebody that you know that knows somebody in that company, and you reach out to your connection, somebody that you already know, you already do business with, or somebody that's you can talk to, that you've met, you know who you are, and you have a conversation with them, say, hey, do you know anybody? Or better yet, I went on LinkedIn and I see you're connected to Anita over at ABC Company, and she's kind of in the right role, in the right position. And I would love to be able to have a couple minutes just to ask her a couple of questions. Would you be willing to do a quick introduction with me, just through the phone, or just do an email introduction, and see if we can have like 10 minutes of a conversation, just some specific questions about the business? People will do it. They don't have a problem with doing the introduction. People don't have a problem with answering those questions, particularly when they're not involved in the sale already. That's one way. The second way is in your sales meetings, when you set up your next sales meeting, you need to ask the question before your first, second, third, fourth, however many every meeting, you should ask the question, is there anybody else who should be sitting at our next meeting, just to make sure that we're all on the same page? And sometimes what will happen is you'll have somebody go, the one person you're talking to says, yeah, we should probably bring in Mary. Okay. Why should we bring in Mary? What is she? Well, she's the finance person. Interesting. What does she need to be? What are some of the questions she might ask? Well, she's going to ask about, how much is it, and how do we pay this off, and what's the timelines, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. That person you're talking to has quickly become that inside person, that helper who's navigating you through. Typically the person you've started the conversation with, if they push you up or they push you sideways or they push you to a different person, they're going to help you navigate. I've had it where people that I've initially had the conversation with did the introduction, started the process, and said, well, okay, you really need to talk to the VP of this. I'll be in the next meeting. Okay, let's talk about the next meeting. Who else is going to be there? Who else should be there? Can we talk about how to approach that person? What kind of person are they like? And you just start asking those questions. They'll tell you. They'll tell you everything. They'll tell you they like to go to this particular restaurant down the street for lunch. They like to do this. They'll tell you whatever you ask. So don't be afraid to ask, but find your helper. The inside helper is your gold mine. They will navigate you through all the processes.
That totally makes sense. And I hadn't really thought of checking LinkedIn to find those second and third connections.
There's always a way. Always a way.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
There is a will, there's a way. Yes.
So what about number 5, Rob?
So number 5 is a little bit related to the researching the client and pressuring yourself a little bit. So here's what I mean. What I want you to always walk away with, once you get to a certain point, you're going to know that they have pains, and you're going to know whether or not your services, your product is going to solve that pain or not. But you need to, before you ever get to a point of discussing numbers, of your own numbers, how much it's going to cost them price-wise, you should always understand what's going to happen to that potential client if they don't get their pain solved, or if they don't get what they want in the end. So remember also, anytime you're talking about pain, we're talking about pain that they're having right now, or pain that they're having in sometime in the future. So it could be pains up, like we're bleeding cash right now, or if we don't solve this problem right now, we're not going to be able to produce. We're not going to be able to fill the orders. We might not, whatever that might be, know what their pain is. The other thing that could be solvable, which is a different setup, but also a form of pain, it's kind of the reverse of pain, is pleasure. It's the desire to have something, right? So it could be the pleasure of something now, meaning I want to have this item now because it's really something that I want to have. It's a status thing. It's an extension of my business. It's an extension of myself, whatever it is. Sometimes it's notoriety. So I've seen companies out there who sell like awards, and they sell awards, not like, hey, this is an award you can give. This is hey, we want to recognize you in this magazine. We're going to do a story, but you're going to pay for it. Basically, they're out there all the time. Right. So that's a pleasure in the now thing, right? There's also pleasure in the future, which is, you think about financial planners. That's what they should be selling on, right? It's not, well, you don't have enough money right now. What financial planners have to really get you to understand is that if you don't start saving now, those pennies and dollars that you have now will not add up to the millions and millions, whatever it is, number that you want in the future. That's the pleasure in the future that you're looking for. So know what that means to that person, to that client, to the business. If you don't understand that, you need to ask more questions about it, make them live it, and make them feel it to the point of you almost have to feel bad for them because they feel so down in the dirt that they have not been able to solve this problem. You don't want to get them that far, but you want to make sure that they understand their problem and you're working through that with them so that you can, once you understand those numbers, you'll be in a much better position to be able to talk about real numbers of what the price of your product or service is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You're trying to figure out if they're having trouble meeting payroll next week, or if they next year they want to buy that speedboat.
Yes. And if they're having trouble making payroll this week, then you may need to figure out where the money's coming from. That's another reason to do it. Like if they can't pay payroll, how are they going to pay you?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So what's the next item, Rob?
So the next item to me is never, ever close the sale. And I know you and I have talked about, I never really close a sale anymore. We kind of joke about that every once in a while. Like I never close anybody. It's true. Your goal as a new salesperson, it sounds weird. As a new salesperson, I remember thinking, what do you mean I'm not supposed to close? What's about this phrase? What is it? Always be ABC, always be closing.
Yeah.
Coffees for closers, all of that, right? Where does that fit into this? Well, it doesn't. Honestly, if you're closing a sale, if you're forcing a close, you have a higher likelihood of having somebody have buyer's remorse. They're going to think they got closed. They're going to feel like, oh, they got me, even though they didn't. But if you're not closing the sale and you're allowing them to buy during the moment when they say, well, so how do we get started? When they start saying stuff like that, I mean, I always ask the question, what do you mean? What do you mean get started? And they're like, well, how do we start the service? How do we get going? You mean right now? And they're like, yeah, right now. When do you, that's what we've been talking about. I want them to say that out loud. I want them to say something like, yeah, I want to start right now. Because what they're doing then is asking for the sale, not me. And when they're asking for the sale, that sale sticks almost.
And they feel good about it. Yeah.
And they feel good about it. They have made all their decisions in their head, and they've made decisions that says, I know this is how much it is. I know this is what's going to solve. I know that I'm going to be able to do this. I know that this could be a problem, but I'm ready to address that problem when it happens. Like you've done all that work with them. You've worked them through that. You're not going to tell them all these things. You are asking all the questions that allow them to come to those conclusions by answering you and explaining to you how you're doing all that or how they're going to do all that. You are making them ask you, well, okay, how do we get started? I sat down one time in a meeting. One time we got through all the pain, all this information. It was a one-time deal where it was like I sat down, go through all the information, and then here's the price. And the guy says, okay, well, what do we do next? And I go, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? And he goes, well, I want to start. I go, start what? He goes, well, we just talked about, I want to do this. I said, okay. But you don't mean like right now? When do you want to start? Like, are you talking like next month or no, right now? I said, okay. He goes, well, how do we start? Like, how do I get it scheduled so that we can start doing this? I'm like, well, in the back of my head, I wanted to say, well, I have to write out an estimate. I have to go through all this documentation, blah, 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 blah. And something in my brain said, this guy is so ready to go. Like it was such a non-event for him. The price was offset by the pain, and the pain was going to be solved very quickly. And if he sold one or two items, he was going to make his money back. And I realized it wasn't really complicated on my end, wasn't complicated on his end. So I said to him, well, there's a couple different ways. I mean, are you thinking like check, or what are you thinking? He's like, yeah, I can write a check. He goes, can I do a credit card? I go, yeah. He goes, well, can you take American Express? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, well, how much is it? And we did the division because it's 50% down and 50% upon deliverable. And he's like, okay, here's my card. And I was like, what the world just happened? But it was because I had let him go through all those steps. And then he started asking about how to do this and how to make this next step go forward without having to go through all the rigmarole of writing the estimate. The dollar amount was low enough. It was low enough risk. I tried it. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. You have to have it written. And at which case I would say when it's a little larger, next step would be for me to write down an estimate for you and make that really clear as to what you're getting, what we're doing, all those extra things, and then the dollar amount associated with it. But I can do that. But I want to make sure you're comfortable with all the things we just talked about from a deliverable standpoint, but also like the numbers at the same time. Usually when that hell happens, they're like, yeah, that's all fine. You might ask the other question that follows up with that, which is, So, oh, no. I'm not going to ask that one. I'm going to tell you that one last.
Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Now, back to the show.
So, Rob, we've got 4 tips left on your list. So we've gone 1 through 6. Obviously, if we have 4 left, that puts us where we are in the list. Are there any gotchas that we should be watching out for?
Well, yeah. So the next item is what I have is this prevent what I feel like is the number one pitfall any new salesperson falls into, and it's because it's so easy. It's this. You ready, Lane? You ready? We're gonna role play it out real quick.
Okay.
Ring. I just called you. I'm the potential client. I'm calling you. Ready? Ring.
Hello, this is Lane.
Hey, Lane, I'm looking for a new web host service. Is that something you guys can do?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Great. How much is it?
Well, they kind of depends on what your needs are, what you're looking
All right.
for.
I have 3 websites, and I have a database that I need to host with some information. Basically, what I'm looking to do is take my database of clients and the information that's associated with it, put it on the back end of the website, but also have a front-facing website so that people can understand what we're doing. How much does something like that run?
Yeah, it still it's a little complicated to go through. We'd really need to sit down and talk about what the problems you're having are, and what your
is there anybody else there that I can talk to that can give me that number?
No, I'm the guy.
All right. So the point is the biggest pitfall you can fall into is to play the game that they like to play, which is I'm in control. Don't give me any crap. I just want to know the numbers, and I want to get myself into a position where I can make a decision with or without you. I don't care about your service, you personally. I don't really care. That is not where you want to be in sales. That's the number one pitfall, is to be the victim of their game. If you are a victim of their game and you find yourself there, and it's so easy. I've been there. I can still get in that role every once in a while. And when I get into that role, even today, what I do is I stop and I basically say to the person, I'm so sorry. I just messed up. And they're like, what? Well, I messed up. Here I am trying to answer your questions. And I just realized I'm giving you bad information because I'm assuming certain things and I don't even know any information. You're telling me one thing, but I don't even know if what I'm assuming what you're saying is accurate. Can I ask you some clarifying questions? And all of a sudden everything starts to pivot, because then they realize, oh yeah, I'm just giving you some answers or giving you some information. And they may still try to pivot back into in control. But the key is at any point in time, when that happens, you just pivot it back again and say, yeah, we're not there yet. Like, I wish I could get that far. It's like we're watching a movie and you're telling me the result of the movie, and I haven't even watched the first 20 minutes. Like, why'd you just tell me the end of the movie? That's kind of what I feel like. You know what I mean? So can we work through the plot and all the different things that go on in the movie before we get to the last gotcha thing that all of a sudden shows up? Like, oh my goodness, they died. What? So when you start doing stuff like that to them, they're not expecting a conversation like that. But they also realize, yeah, you're going to need some information before you can give them all the information.
Right.
My goal in this prevent the top pitfall for any new salesperson really is, don't give them the information that's going to solve their problem at any time in the process, until you make the sale. So I've seen people who do consulting work, or who do PR work, or who do advertising work, or who do all kinds of different things, who will say, well, why don't you just do this? Or we could just put you on Instagram and then I'm like, why are you telling them what to do? They can go figure that out themselves. They came to you because you're the expert. Don't tell them. Do you want my problem? You want me to solve your problem? Let's talk. If you don't want me to solve the problem, have at it. I don't need another client. It goes back to that other, which is, I have $1 million in my pocket. I don't need to solve your problem until you're a client. That's kind of the attitude and the mentality, right? Don't try to show off is really what it comes down to. If you're trying to show off to a client how good you are by giving them advice and tips, you're actually not doing yourself a service. You think you are, but that's more about your own headspace than it is about what's reality. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Yeah, I think it does. When you were talking there, I was thinking of someone in marketing, like digital marketing, where, hey, I understand your problem is X, and this is what we can do to solve that problem. But I guess really what you're saying is don't tell them how you're going to solve the problem. You need to convince them why you're the best person to solve that
No,
problem.
I wouldn't convince them at all.
No, that's right. I'm using the wrong words. They need to. Well, okay. So,
They need to come to their own conclusion. So
yeah.
by asking all the questions and them having to answer it, they know you understand the business. Because if they've talked to anybody else, if you're going the social media route and they start asking questions of other people that are in social media, and then they get to you and you start asking all these questions, you should hear the question back or the statement back. You should hear this back. Nobody else has asked me that question before. And when you hear that statement come back to you of, nobody else has asked me that question, that's when you know you're doing it right. If you don't get that question coming back or that statement coming back, you might be missing some things. They need to come to their own conclusion. And sometimes, honestly, their own conclusion is, I can do this myself. Their own conclusion can be, you're not the best fit for me. Their own conclusion can be, I'll have somebody else do this. I can get a college kid to do this. Fine. Go ahead. Have a college kid do it. You get what you pay for, and they'll come back.
Yeah.
And if they say that, I'm going to have a go college kid to go do it. Okay, great. No problem. I really hope I wish you guys well. Listen, here's the thing. People have said that to me before, and I'm totally comfortable with it. I would rather you go try that. Here's what could happen. One of two things can happen. One is they knock it out of the park, and I hope they do. And I hope you hire them and like you just take them in and you develop them. But the other thing that can happen is they mess things up and they don't do things right and they don't get the results you want. And that's okay too. Listen, they're college kids. They're learning as they go, and that's okay. Let me know if you ever need any more help or you need any tips or advice. I might be able to help that person. And what you've just done is said, I'm here to help you, man.
Yeah.
You're not going to spill any beans. You're not going to tell them what to do. And when they call you and say, hey, can you help you? Now you're in a real conversation. Now there's pain. I've spent money. I've hired this person. I don't feel like I want to get rid of them. I need some help. And maybe there's a way that you can use that person to get through all of the different things that you need to do for your service, but also add on some services of your own. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with that, but now they're in pain. And that when you use that conversation to say, okay, what's our next step after that? You might find yourself in the same boat where you go, well, all right, they're not going to go anywhere, but you may find out that they could use your extra hands. So,
okay. Still difficult mentally to wrap my head around how not to give that information. But I guess I know we've talked about that before, but that's still one of those things that in my head, I'm like, how do you not do that? But
that is your own head getting in your own way. We should talk about that sometime in the future. Here's what I mean by that, though. Basically, what it comes down to is there is some sort of a need that you're trying to solve of your own, and that's why there's a need to do it.
Okay, we'll talk about that another day.
Sounds good.
So, tip number 8. Where we headed here?
All right, where we headed? So, tip number 8 is stay equal. So, I always think of the Dos Equis question commercial where they're like, stay thirsty, my friends. Same idea, stay equal, my friends. So here's what I would think is you always want to be an equal of the person you're speaking to on the other end of the phone. So that conversation we had, or we just did a little fun little run through with, they're kind of trying to be in charge. They're the ones driving things. They're the ones that are going to be telling you what to do. It's going to go into the next point here too, but that's not where you want to be. Where you want to be, you don't want to be a subordinate. And you don't want to be a vendor. You are a partner, a coach, a consultant. You're somebody that's of equal stature, if you will, right? That's what you really are after. You want them to understand that you're a professional, they're a professional, and you guys are on the same plane. The fact that they want to do business with you should be enough for them to be able to stay on the same playing field. And you have to force that sometimes, or you have to position yourself and not accept anything less than that. Make them act as if you guys are equals so that you stay an equal later on too.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Well, then that kind of goes to the next item too, which to me is number 9 is start right, stay right. Any guesses as to what that means without reading it?
Start right, stay right. Based on what we've kind of talked about, I would say, start the process, though, the right way, and don't let your process get derailed. Stay on the
Very
right
close.
path.
Yes. Yeah, very close. Have you ever heard of the phrase, once a cheater, always a cheater?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
There's an inherent nature with some people to behave a certain way. And I don't mean the cheating piece. That can be some other other things that are happening there. But if you start out the conversation, it kind of goes back to that last point, which is if you start out the conversation in your meetings where you are on a level playing field with them and you're equal, if you will, then you should be able to stay in an equal stature, if you will. And what you don't want to do is be a vendor. What you want to be is a partner.
Yeah.
And so
That's the word I was just thinking of. Yeah.
yeah, partner, an advisor, any of those types of that terminology is where you want to stay. And so if you started out that way, that's the way it should start, right? If you started out right, you should stay right. The inverse of this is true. If you start wrong, it stays wrong. There have been times where I've taken on a client and they act like in the sales process, they act like they want to treat you that way. But every so often there's like this little nuance thing. You're like, that didn't sound right. You didn't think of me as an equal there. And when that happens, a little bell goes off in my head. This time I thought it was dinner, so I ignored it. So here's what happened. These little bells kept going off every so often. Well, we ended up getting hired for it. We start the process. We get going. We went into the first meeting. The first meeting was like disaster. The guy was all over the place. He was unorganized. He was a little unorganized in the sales process, but more importantly, when we got to that meeting, he was unorganized. He wanted to tell us what to do. He insisted that nobody understood what he was looking for, even though we'd already gone through all what he wanted to do before. We all had that on paper. We all knew what it was. He was all over the place. And honestly, at that point, it was like, wow, this is starting off this way after he hired us. It was a little bit that way when we were in the sales process, but it's getting worse now that we're in person in the sale or in the process here of actually working together. Now, what do we do? And we ended up we made him a potential client again. By that, we mean we made him a potential customer and we said, be on your merry way. And we gave him his money back because you know what? There's no sense in arguing. We spent a little, yes, we lost time. Was it too much that we couldn't recover? No. Was it, we had any output in our dollars? No, it was just time. And we were like, okay, this is one we mark up as an experience that this didn't start out right in the sale. It was subtle, but it was subtle enough that was like that pinged something. But when the first meeting happened, it was so outrageous. We were like, nope, that's not, we're not doing this because we're not equals. And that's not acceptable. And it shouldn't be acceptable for anybody else as well.
So before the break, you were about to trip into one of the other items on your list, and you said we would get to that at the very end. So I think we've reached the end of our list. This is number 10.
All right. Yep. So
drum roll, please.
Here we go. Drum roll, please. The last item that I almost spilled the beans on. So we were talking about never closing the sale, and making them ask for the sale. And all the things we were talking about. And then all of a sudden we talked about payroll. I think we talked about, right? When there was a piece in the payroll piece where they weren't paying.
If they can't pay their payroll, how are they going to pay you?
How are they going to pay you? Which then led to my next thought, which is actually the last one on my list, which is follow the money. So as a newbie, if you get the sale and you are all excited because they're getting ready to sign that estimate for you, and or the proposal, whatever you want to call it, they're getting ready to sign it. And just as they sign it, now they want to talk about terms. And terms, depending on your business, your style, your process, can kill you. So never talk about terms after you agreed. Always talk about terms early. So when I say follow the money, here's what I would say. Know where the money is going to be coming from. You kind of have to think about it as if you're a reporter. You have to ask all these questions. So who's going to be involved with making sure that we have the deposit, or who's going to make sure that the monthly payments are going to be, who's going to be my point of contact? Is that this person? Is that? If you don't know the answer already, if they haven't already told you, I'm saying these things, you should know the answer to these questions. You don't have to ask them if they tell you this in your process, but who is, what's the process? What are the terms? What are anything that has to do with the what's? Then when? Well, when is it? If I submit an invoice, when is it going to come back and be paid? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 10 days? What is that?
Yep.
Where is it coming from? Is it coming from the marketing budget, or is it coming from the HR budget, or is it coming from the sales? Where is this coming from? What part of the budget is it coming from? And then how do you guys plan to make the payments? Is this a direct deposit? Is this an e-check? Is this a Visa? Those are the questions you should really start to get to know before you close the sale. Follow the money all the way to the end so you know where things are coming from and how they're going to get there. Make them explain who needs to approve, what needs to happen, when or how fast it's going to happen, where it's going to come from. All of those questions, really, you need to have answers to before you sign the agreement. If you don't have those answers, hold off before you let them sign, because you got to know this before you accept the sale. If you're not comfortable with any of the payments or any of the terms, then you need to be able to free yourself up and just say, I'm not comfortable with that. How do we fix that? If you have somebody that says our terms are 90 days, but you're going to be out cash in 30 days every time they do the work. In other words, your expenses are going to, now you're going to be inverted. So that's not going to work. How are you going to do that? You can't. So the realistic question needs to be, guys, you have a 90-day, but as you can see that there's some things that we do in the meantime, and there are some hard numbers that come involved early on. I don't know how I'm going to be able to accept the terms of that. What other options do we have? How do we do this? Like, I want to work with you guys, but how do we do this? Make it their problem, not yours. And what'll happen? Yeah. And what'll happen is they'll go, what if we just did a larger deposit? So we have a 6-month agreement. The total is 100,000, but we weren't going to pay you the first, sixth, whatever that number is, for 90 days. Well, okay. But instead of doing it, now what if they said, all right, let's just do a 40% deposit to start, and then we'll pay the rest out over the course of 90 days. You start invoicing as soon as we get it. The last invoice is payable with 90 days after the end of the 6 months. That may be acceptable because now you can budget accordingly. Right?
The numbers might work.
Yeah, the numbers might work. You have to figure that out and make sure that all the way that you do it works for you, works for them. Neither side should be unhappy. I know compromise is a word, both sides are unhappy, but that shouldn't be the case in this. Both of you should be happy with what we're doing, what we're going for, how the terms are going to be, what the numbers are going to be. So always follow the money by asking all the reporter questions. Does that make sense?
Completely. At the end of the day, you don't want to sign an order or accept an order if you don't know how you're going to get paid, and that really needs to be part of the, those terms really need to be part of that order, that estimate, the contract, whatever you want to call it. You've got to have those answers before you can really complete that document.
Yeah. And I'm always a little surprised when people don't have that information. It's a little bit odd to me. How did you not ask the question? And there's another head issue going on with that, by the way. If somebody doesn't want to ask that question about money, there's a problem in the salesperson head. You, the beginner out there, if you have a hard time asking questions about money, don't get into sales too fast. What you need to do is work on that piece first, because if you're not able to ask money questions and get into the dollar part, you're never going to be able to really feel comfortable charging enough, working on terms, dealing with, the numbers don't quite work here. How do we work through this? Those are hard questions. I get it. But by asking those questions, you're going to get resolution rather than, well, we're just going to take it. And we got the sale, but the numbers aren't going to, the timing isn't working. We're going to be underwater. We need to find another client just to make sure that we can pay all the bills. That's not good. You cannot work that way. Don't accept that.
Yeah. I've seen instances where you mentioned a 90-day and the instance I'm thinking of was a 90-day, and we ended up raising the margin before we gave the price to the client so that we knew we could handle that 90-day.
Yeah.
They don't know I'm charging them more, but in order to hit their accounting rules for 90 days, that's the only way it was going to work.
Yep. Yeah. That's the other way to do it. I mean, sometimes that conversation comes up in the middle of, okay, we're getting ready to sign here. Whoa. If you haven't talked about numbers, it's too late. Then you need to deal with that before they sign, right?
Yeah.
All of these things, to me, every single one of these top, I feel like, are tips, issues, things that could go wrong for a new salesperson, to me are somewhat basic, but I also feel like they make you a better salesperson if you nail or get all of these down and understand all of these and think about these things before you get too far into a sale. Because if you can do that, you'll end up with, in my opinion, you'll end up with a bigger check at the end. You'll make more money. You'll be happier. You'll understand where things are, what's going on, and why they're going the way they are. And things will be just easier for you. So if you're new to sales and you need some help, go through this list, We'll put it up on the website, theslowpitch.com, just so you can look at it. I'll put these little bullet points up there so you can understand what they are a little bit. But really what I want you to do is think about which one or two or maybe top 3 that you need to work on, and start to work on figuring out how to make those things not an issue for you anymore. And if you find that 1 or 2 of these items are an issue for you and you don't find another episode that's about this, I want you to email us. I want you to email us and say, hey, I have a problem with whichever one that is. And can you guys talk about that? Happy to do it.
All right, Rob. Well, I think from what we've talked about, at least for me, the best tip that I'm going to walk away with is find your helper, because I never really thought of looking at LinkedIn to go try to find those, who might know who inside. I've used LinkedIn as a research tool, but yeah, trying to find that helper through LinkedIn, I think that's a great one.
It's gotten me through a few things, so I can imagine it'll help for others as well. Because I nothing better than somebody that's on the inside can tell you, oh, by the way, here's how you need to do this, or don't forget. It's just same way as you have a prospect or a potential client who has worked with another company before, and that other company says to you, I wouldn't do business with them. They never pay their bills on time. Yeah. That's valuable information. And same idea as this, right? That this person is going to make things happen. They're never going to get anything done for you. Okay, now I know, right?
Yep. Super valuable.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, let's call it a show. And if you found this helpful, please follow us and subscribe and all that good stuff. But until next time, we'll see you later, Lane.
See you, Rob.
Thank you for listening to The Slow Pitch. Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Slow down and close more.
Thanks as always for listening today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. We really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Slow Pitch. We were mixed today, as always, by Johnny Polakis, and we were produced by High Gravity Studios. Music credits and other notes are in the show notes section on theslowpitch.com, and we'll be back with another episode soon.